Have you ever heard of the Lusitanians? No? Then you are about to discover a story so impressive that it will leave your mind reeling and even a little scared. Imagine that you are a warrior, with nothing but a rusty sword and a worn shield, and you find yourself face to face with a huge, invincible, unbeatable army. Now, what would you do if that army were made up of the Romans, the greatest conquerors the world has ever known? The Lusitanians, a simple but fearless people, lived in the mountains and forests of the Iberian Peninsula. A people who, even knowing that they were in a losing battle, rose up to face the most powerful empire in history. They were at a disadvantage, without the strength of Rome, but they had no choice but to fight to the end. They had only one trump card. They knew their land better than anyone, and they were willing to die for it. Now, imagine the fear and tension of those battles. Imagine what went through the minds of the Lusitanians when they felt that victory seemed increasingly distant. What if I told you that behind all this bravery, there were terrifying moments and unexpected betrayals, and that, even when all seemed lost, the Portuguese never gave up? They faced an immense enemy, and at times you will even ask yourself, how could anyone have survived that? I know this scenario has already left you with a knot in your stomach, and you must be asking yourself, but how is that possible? How did they manage to resist for so long? Stay with me, because in the video I will show you exactly how these warriors defied Rome, the solution to their victories and defeats, and how their story still resonates today. I guarantee you, what is coming will affect you in a way you could not imagine. Prepare yourself to understand the power that fear and courage can have together in history. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, take advantage now to be part of our community. Every interaction you make makes this space more special. History and culture of the Lusitanians. Imagine a region dominated by mountains and valleys, where every curve of the terrain was more than just a landscape. It was a strategic advantage. It was there, between the Douro and Tagus rivers, that the Lusitanian people flourished, whose fierce resistance and cultural identity still echo through the centuries. But who were the Lusitanians after all? Did their legacy go beyond battles and war feats? Get ready to discover one of the most fascinating cultures of the Iberian Peninsula and discover how these people shaped the history of an entire region. The Lusitanians were not mere inhabitants of the Iberian Peninsula. They were warriors, farmers, shepherds and artisans with their own identity forged in adverse conditions. Their origins date back to the mixture of Indo-European peoples who arrived in the region around the 2nd millennium BC, bringing with them skills in metallurgy and deeply rooted spiritual traditions. This heritage, combined with Celtic influence, gave rise to a people with a strong connection to the land and the natural cycle of the seasons. The daily life of the Lusitanians was marked by their relationship with the environment around them. They lived in castros, small fortified villages strategically located on hills. These fortifications were not only protection against invaders, they were centers of community life, where families gathered to share stories, plan harvests, and prepare for the future. The architecture of these castros reflects a deep understanding of the local geography. Their circular walls followed the contours of the hills, creating structures that were both functional and harmonious with the environment. In times of peace, they were places of coexistence. In times of war, they became bastions of defense. The social organization of the Lusitanians is also noteworthy. Each community was led by a chief, chosen not only for his strength, but also for his wisdom and ability to conduct negotiations and alliances. The concept of leadership among the Lusitanians went beyond physical power. It also involved the ability to inspire and maintain unity among a people who deeply valued freedom and independence. This system favored internal cohesion, especially in times of conflict. For the Portuguese, war was not just a fight for territory, but also a way of defending their way of life and beliefs. What really set the Lusitanians apart was their skill in combat. They were known for their courage and their unique guerrilla tactics, which made the most of the difficulties imposed by the rugged landscape. Unlike many of their enemies, the Lusitanians did not rely on armies organized in rigid formations. Instead, their strategy was fluid, adaptable, and extremely effective in ambushes and surprise attacks. They knew every route, cave, and canyon in their homeland, using this to their advantage in battles against better-equipped enemies who were less familiar with the terrain. In addition to warfare, the Lusitanian people were also deeply spiritual. They worshipped deities linked to nature, such as Ataegina, the goddess of fertility and renewal, and Endovelico, a protector and healer. Shrines carved into rocks or located on mountainsides were the main places of worship, where rituals were performed that connected the people to the forces of nature. These rituals not only reinforced the faith of the Lusitanians, but also served as moments of collective unity and celebration. In times of hardship, spirituality was a refuge that fueled hope and resilience. The Lusitanian economy was also a reflection of their adaptation to their environment. They cultivated cereals, raised livestock, and were experts in beekeeping, producing honey that was highly valued. Metallurgy, however, was one of the greatest prides of the Lusitanian people. They extracted minerals from the mountains and produced weapons, utensils, and ornaments with a skill that impressed even their Roman enemies. This ability to produce high-quality equipment contributed directly to their ability to resist external threats. Festivities also played a central role in Lusitanian culture. They celebrated the seasons, the harvest, and the heroic deeds of their warriors. During these events, the sound of drums and flutes echoed across the mountains, while dancing and banquets brought the people together in moments of joy and unity. These celebrations were not just moments of leisure, but also a way of transmitting traditions and reinforcing collective identity. Now imagine living in a region where every choice was a matter of survival. What would you do to protect your land, your family, and your culture? The Lusitanians found their answers in adaptation, resistance, and unity. And you, what would you do in similar situations? Share your thoughts and connect with this story of courage and determination. But this is only part of the story. In the next chapter, we will uncover the intense conflicts that defined the confrontation between the Lusitanians and the powerful Roman Empire. Don't miss it, because the battles and betrayals that will arise show how even the strongest of warriors can face unexpected challenges. Conflicts with Rome. Imagine a nation that rises up with courage against the most powerful empire in history. How could a smaller people, isolated between mountains and valleys, dare to challenge the Roman legions, known for their relentless discipline and overwhelming strength? The conflicts between the Lusitanians and Rome are not just battles on the battlefield. They are also a portrait of a resistance that defied the odds. As we delve into the tactics, betrayals, and leaders that marked this struggle, we are led to reflect. What makes a resistance memorable and lasting? The first tensions between the Lusitanians and the Romans began to form in the context of Roman expansion in the Iberian Peninsula. After the Second Punic War, Rome began to consolidate its control over the region. For the Lusitanians, however, this meant the beginning of an era of constant conflict. The Romans were not just a military force, they represented a threat to the culture, land, and freedom that the Lusitanians held so dear. Thus, confrontation was inevitable. One of the most striking characteristics of the Lusitanians was their ability to transform the mountainous terrain into a weapon against invaders. While the Romans relied on rigid formations and disciplined tactics among their legions, the Lusitanians employed guerrilla tactics, precise ambushes, rapid attacks, and the ability to disappear into the mountains created a challenge the Romans had rarely encountered in their history. These tactics not only confounded the Romans, but also boosted the morale of the Lusitanians, who saw each victory as proof of their collective strength. The Romans, on the other hand, were not known for giving up easily. They responded with a combination of diplomacy and brutality. Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, for example, tried a more diplomatic approach, seeking to establish treaties with the Lusitanians. These treaties were often used as a way to buy time to reorganize the legions and prepare new campaigns. However, this diplomacy was often accompanied by betrayal. One of the most infamous episodes was the massacre led by Servius Sulpicius Galba, who lured the Lusitanians with promises of peace only to brutally attack them, causing enormous loss of life and deeply wounding the relationship between the two peoples. And then came a legendary figure, Viriathus. This was not just a warrior, he was the heart and soul of the Lusitanian resistance. From shepherd to military strategist, Viriathus became a symbol of the struggle against Rome. Under his leadership, the Lusitanians united as never before, achieving impressive victories against the Roman legions. Viriathus's ability to inspire his countrymen and use innovative tactics made him a true legend. With few resources and a smaller army, he managed to take on one of the greatest empires of the ancient world, showing that courage and strategy can overcome numbers and power. Viriathus became known for his cunning on the battlefield. He often lured the Romans into carefully planned traps, where the steep terrain favored the Lusitanians. Stories of his bravery spread throughout the region, inspiring other tribes to join the fight. His ability to unite such a diverse people under a single cause was a feat that even the most seasoned Roman leaders could not ignore. But like all legends, his story also has its dark moments. In one of the greatest betrayals in ancient history, Viriathus was assassinated by his own allies, who had been bribed by the Romans. The famous phrase, "Rome does not pay traitors," resonates as a reminder of the fate of those who betrayed him, because even after the vile act, the conspirators did not receive the promised rewards. His death marked a turning point in the Lusitanian resistance. Without his charismatic leadership, the people lost part of their unity and strength, paving the way for progressive Roman domination. The conflicts between the Lusitanians and Rome were not only physical battles, they were also ideological and cultural confrontations. They represented the struggle of a people to preserve their identity in the face of an empire that sought to absorb everything in its path. Each ambush, each victory, and each sacrifice carried with it the essence of a people who refused to disappear without a fight. However, the fall of the resistance did not erase the mark left by the Lusitanians. Their bravery and tenacity continue to be celebrated as a symbol of resilience. The stories of Viriathus and his people are still told as a testament to the power of unity and determination. Now, imagine living in such a turbulent time. Would you have the courage to face such a powerful empire? What tactics would you use to protect what is yours? If you had to lead a resistance, what would your strategy be? Share your ideas and opinions in the comments. We want to know how you imagine being in this story. And don't miss the next part, where we will discuss the consequences of this epic confrontation and how it shaped the future of the region, as well as revealing how the echoes of this resistance can still be felt today. Consequences and legacy. Have you ever wondered how the marks of a resistance can echo through the centuries? Even in the face of their defeat, the Lusitanians left an impact that transcends the battles themselves. But how did a people who faced the greatest empire of their time manage to shape the identity of a nation that was yet to be born? The legacy of the Lusitanians is a story of survival, adaptation, and memory. The subjugation of Lusitania by the Roman Empire did not happen overnight. It was a gradual process, marked by military campaigns, sporadic resistance, and forced cultural integration. With Viriathus's death, the unity between the Lusitanian clans began to disintegrate, leaving the region vulnerable to Roman domination. Even so, the incorporation of Lusitania into the empire was anything but smooth. Minor rebellions and acts of defiance continued to occur, as if the echoes of Viriathus' spirit still resounded among the mountains and valleys of the region. Under Roman rule, Lusitania became a formal province in 27 BC during the rule of Augustus. Cities began to transform themselves to Roman standards. Paved roads connected settlements, aqueducts brought water to communities, and amphitheaters emerged as entertainment centers. Roman culture was imposed, but the Lusitanians did not completely abandon their traditions. Local cultural practices, such as rituals to native deities, were mixed with Roman beliefs, creating a hybrid identity that persisted for generations. Romanization brought material benefits, but also challenges for the Lusitanian people. Many were forced to adapt to the Roman economic system, with the introduction of taxes, military service, and new modes of production. On the other hand, the infrastructure developed by the Romans paved the way for commercial and cultural exchange. The region began to produce goods such as olive oil, wine, and cereals on a large scale, which were exported to other parts of the empire. Although it may seem like a victory for Rome, it is important to recognize that the Lusitanians were not just passive victims of this process. They also shaped the way the region was integrated into the empire. What about their cultural legacy? The spirit of resistance and bravery of the Lusitanians have been immortalized in the history of Portugal. Viriato became a national symbol, representing the fight for independence and the resilience of a people in the face of adversity. During the Middle Ages, Portuguese chroniclers often mentioned the Lusitanians as ancestors of the Portuguese, using their history to legitimize national identity and strengthen the feeling of unity. Interestingly, to this day, traces of this heritage can be seen in various areas of Portuguese culture. The traits of resistance and adaptation that defined the Lusitanians can be seen in the way Portugal overcame historical challenges, from the Reconquista to the era of the Great Navigations. Even traditional dances and festivities carry elements that recall the ancient rituals of celebration and connection with nature practiced by the Lusitanians. In terms of historical contributions, it is important to note that Lusitania, under Roman rule, played a significant role as a supplier of resources and soldiers to the empire. Many legions were staffed by Lusitanian warriors, whose fame for their combat prowess continued to spread. In addition, the region was home to important figures in Roman politics, such as Seneca the philosopher and his nephew, Emperor Nero, who had roots in the Iberian Peninsula. So how do we reconcile the fact that such a fiercely independent people ended up being absorbed by a foreign empire? Perhaps the true victory of the Lusitanians was not military, but cultural. Even after centuries of domination, the essence of their identity was not completely erased. Instead, it evolved, becoming part of something larger. And, when reflecting on this history, it is impossible not to ask, what aspects of our current culture are direct legacies of this distant past? Could it be that at some point, we are also building a legacy that will echo into the future? Leave your thoughts in the comments. After all, each perspective adds a new layer to this story that is not only about the past, but also about what it means to resist and persist over time. And in the next part, we will unravel how the stories of courage and resistance of the Lusitanians inspired future movements, shaping nations and legends that endure to this day. The impact of geography on the resistance of the Lusitanians. Imagine yourself in a land where the rugged terrain and mountains seem to form a natural fortress. Each step is a challenging journey, but at the same time, it offers unexpected advantages. This is what the Lusitanians found in their homeland, a mountainous and difficult region that stretched across much of the Iberian Peninsula. It was not just a geographical feature, it was a crucial factor in their resistance to the Roman invaders. The mountains, rivers and valleys formed natural barriers that protected the Lusitanians from the Roman armies, offering strategic refuges that allowed for ambushes and quick attacks. Each village, each small town, was positioned in such a way as to make it difficult for a massed Roman army to act. This knowledge of the terrain became a differentiator, as the Lusitanians were masters at using geography to their advantage. Imagine a scenario. The sun sets behind the mountains, and the Lusitanian warriors position themselves, invisible in the shadows of the mountains, waiting for the right moment to attack the Roman forces who believe they are safe. This was the secret behind the resistance that for years defied imperial power. Now, imagine how this knowledge of the land and guerrilla tactics played an essential role in creating a culture that valued independence, freedom, and the fight for survival. It is not difficult to see how geography was not just an obstacle, but an indispensable ally. And what does this mean for us today? How does nature still influence the way we fight for our beliefs and values? Stay tuned, because the following story will surprise you. Celtic influence and Indo-European roots. The Lusitanians were not an isolated people, as many might imagine. They were part of a complex cultural tapestry, intertwined with influences from various peoples who passed through their lands over the centuries. Among them were the Celts, whose habits and beliefs blended with Portuguese traditions, creating a unique identity. In their origins, the Lusitanians were, to a large extent, descendants of Indo-European peoples who brought with them a vast set of traditions, languages, and beliefs. Celtic influence intertwined with these roots, strengthening the guerrilla culture and resilience of the Portuguese tribes. The Celts, known for their skill in battle and their deep connection with nature, brought with them not only new methods of combat, but also a rich mythology and spiritualism, which helped shape the worldview of the Lusitanians. But what is most fascinating is that the Lusitanians were not just warriors, they were also farmers, hunters, and masters of nature. The cultural marriage between Celtic traditions and Indo-European values brought harmony between wildlife and social life. This resulted in a society that knew how to fight and also how to live in balance with the earth. This legacy of strength and connection with nature has remained alive in subsequent generations. Have you ever wondered how the traditions of ancient peoples still influence modern cultures? Could it be that in some way, this ancient force can still be felt in our everyday lives? Leave your thoughts in the comments as we move on to the next chapter, where the Empire of Rome enters the scene in full force. The Roman conquest. Conflicts and diplomatic attempts. Rome's advance on the Iberian Peninsula was inevitable, and although the Portuguese tribes were skilled and resilient, the Roman Empire was a formidable war machine with well-trained, disciplined, and ruthless armies. The resistance of the Lusitanians was not just a series of battles, but a constant and fierce fight for freedom. But curiously, Rome also tried a diplomatic route to contain the revolt. One of the most interesting moments of this period was the attempt by Tiberius Gracchus, a Roman tribune, to reach an agreement with the Lusitanians. He realized that the war would not be easily won, so he sought a more peaceful solution, offering a series of concessions and promises of autonomy. However, as expected, tensions continued to grow, and the Lusitanians, under the leadership of Viriathus, opted for resistance. Tiberius Gracchus may have underestimated the strength of Lusitanian pride, for in many ways the Lusitanians were not just fighting Rome, but defending a way of life they considered sacred. The attempt at peace was only a brief interlude before the storm, and history teaches us that sometimes it is the desire for freedom that drives a nation to resist, even in the face of seemingly invincible forces. Do you think that in times of crisis it is possible to find a peaceful solution to conflicts, or is fighting inevitable? Let us know what you think as we head into the final chapter of this epic stand, the death of Viriathus and the massacre of Galba. The history of Portuguese resistance reached its peak with Viriathus, a charismatic leader who became the symbol of the fight for freedom against Roman oppression. Viriathus was not just a military commander, he was the heart and soul of the Portuguese resistance. With impressive strategic intelligence, he commanded attacks that destabilized Roman forces for years. His tactics, which exploited the terrain and deep knowledge of his people, showed a leader who knew how to defeat a much more powerful enemy. However, like so many other stories of resistance, Viriathus's fate was marked by betrayal. The Roman Empire, faced with the power he represented, corrupted Viriathus's own allies. Under the promise of rewards, 3 traitors handed the Lusitanian leader over to death. Viriathus's assassination was a devastating blow to the resistance, and his body was taken to the Roman Empire as proof of triumph. But paradoxically, Viriathus's legacy was not erased with his death. His courage and fight for freedom became an enduring symbol of resistance, an inspiration that transcended generations. Viriathus's death did not mean the end of the Lusitanian struggle for freedom, but rather the beginning of a new chapter of resistance that would live on in the collective memory. Now think about the impact of betrayal on history. How often, in the fight for justice, do those closest to us turn against our causes? Do you believe that even in the face of betrayal, a leader's resistance can continue to inspire the fight for a more just world? The incorporation of Lusitania into the Roman Empire. The living legacy. Although the resistance of the Lusitanians was brutally crushed, their culture and identity never completely disappeared. Lusitania, after its incorporation into the Roman Empire, did not lose its traditions and roots. On the contrary, they merged with Roman culture, creating a new society that was both Roman and Lusitanian. The legacy of the Lusitanians endures to this day in Portugal, whose cultural roots go back to those first inhabitants of the Iberian Peninsula. The fight for independence, the pride of their land, and the courage in the face of the empire remain alive in the Portuguese identity. Did you know that the impact of the Lusitanian resistance can still be felt in the modern history of Portugal? In every street, in every square, there are echoes of that fight for freedom that never disappeared. Now, what do you think we can learn from the struggle and legacy of a people who, even in the face of defeat, never stopped fighting for their identity? Have you ever felt part of a story greater than yourself? How does this ancient struggle resonate in your life today? Share it with us, because your story is also part of this narrative. So, have you ever stopped to think about how the Lusitanians, with their courage and wisdom, were able to challenge an empire as powerful as Rome? But their story did not end with the Roman conquest. No, in fact, the legacy of the Lusitanians was marked in the culture, identity, and soul of a people who still carry the memory of those warriors from the Iberian Peninsula. Now, if you thought that this story was over, stay tuned, because the struggle and deeds of these warriors, who knew the land like no one else, are still a great inspiration to us today. The Lusitanians were not just warriors with swords and shields, they were masters of strategy and resistance, and their spirit lives on to this day. But here's a thought. Could it be that just like the Lusitanians, we have something inside us that makes us fight for our beliefs, for what we believe in? What would our Lusitania be? That land for which we would fight with all our strength? Leave your ideas in the comments and share with us how you see resistance and the fight for your own values. Stay tuned, because the history of the Lusitanians, with its lessons on courage and identity, will surprise you even more. Who knows, maybe you will see yourself as a true warrior too.